Welcome back. We are GAME2007. That's Multiplayer Game Design 1 in the winter 2026 semester at Georgian. And it is week 3, part 1 of our broadcast and recording for this week. My goal this week is to try and get you as close to assignment 1 ready as possible. Some of that will be on you to do, some things I will give you to do. But by next week, for sure, Wednesday, Thursday, you'll have everything you need for assignment 1. So as I mentioned, just from a announcement perspective, I will extend your assignments, my friends. Hello? Oh, am I getting your attention yet? I'm extending your assignments until probably Monday or Tuesday, and because I want to support Global Game Jam, the people who will participate for Global Game Jam. So if you're worried about getting your assignments done, I will give you a couple days to get it done so that you can participate. I'm really hoping that you'll come out. You get a t-shirt, some pizza. You get the workshop on Saturday, which is pretty good to learn how to do mocap with Wallace. We just set up the mocap studio today and made sure it worked. And it's a good opportunity for you guys to get together and build a game, right? And something new that you haven't had a chance to do. You don't have to use Unreal Engine. You could use Raylib if you really want to with Connor. You could use Godot if you really want to do that. You could use Unity. It doesn't matter what game engine that you use as long as you have a good time. All right, that's the part. The idea here is it's going to be a fun time that we're going to get together and you're going to do your thing, right? So hopefully you'll come out. And again, it won't be reflected on Blackboard until probably Friday, tomorrow. I'll probably update all the assignments so that they show. I'll probably do Tuesday just to give you a couple days grace. Because I know it's like the weekend is, you're going to get a write-off for you guys working on stuff. And it'll give you a couple more days to get together with your partner and all that stuff so that you have some really great assignment 1s that I can get from you guys for next Tuesday. Okay? That's the assignment. That's the thing. I want to support Global Game Jam. I don't want you to feel threatened by, the time that you're there and you're like, well, I can't do it because I got so many assignments. Yes, you do, and they're not going to stop. But I think it's a great opportunity. Take the opportunity to make as many games as possible. Is my thoughts. Even experiment. It's really important to experiment, whether it's Unreal Engine or Unity or whatever game engine, because you learn a lot through experimentation, even if you never make a game at the end. Like if your game fails, it doesn't work. It's okay. You experimented, you tried some stuff out, you spend the day doing that. It's like sharpening the axe, if you will. And you guys ever hear that sharpening the axe story? No? Oh yeah, it's a business thing, right? So there's 2 lumberjacks, an old guy and a young guy. The young guy's really strong. I'm paraphrasing, okay, to make it quick, if we don't have a lot of time. The young guy's really strong, and he comes in, to work with the old guy. And he says, I challenge you, can I see this, who can cut the most, trees down? And the old guy goes, okay, right? And the young guy, he just chops away. He's going like crazy, and he's chopping trees down. And every time they sit down and take a break, he tells the old guy how many trees you cut down. And in the beginning, the young guy, he's got a lot of trees cut down. And the old guy, he hasn't cut as many trees down, but it's a consistent number every single time. And at the end, the old guy has more trees cut down than the young guy, and the young guy's like, how did you do it? You were sitting down half the time. You were taking a lot of breaks and all this kind of stuff. And the old guy says, I was sharpening my axe, right? And this is what this thing is for you guys. This is sharpening the axe. It's the ability for you guys to further do what you're doing in school, which is experiment, learn, try different things out, and fail early and figure things out, and not fail in the workplace. That's what the whole thing is, right? When you're working for somebody else, or if you have an idea that you want to pull off on your own, this is some opportunity for you to do that. So I fully encourage you guys again. I know I'm kind of really pumping this one, but I really want you guys to go. And it's not just because from a participation perspective, like the numbers, I don't care about that. We're not making money after $20, all right? It's not that. It's really just for you guys. It's an opportunity for you guys to get a game going, and maybe partner with some people you haven't had a chance to do so with. Okay, that's it for service announcements. So again, I will move that out. Just as a reminder, tomorrow, and I did work with, I talked to Connor about it, so he knows. Tomorrow, it's online, okay? We're doing an online session. I have a conflict, and just to make sure that you guys know, I will publish an announcement on this, because there might be some people in class that are not in class right now, just to make sure that people, understand that. So most likely tomorrow morning, you're going to get an announcement that comes out that says, we're working online, right? We're teaching remotely today. And it's not because of the weather, although I do hear that the weather's going to be pretty rough tomorrow anyway, right? I'm hearing like 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, right? Between here and where I live, right? So it kind of worked out. Okay, so today, what are we doing? We are talking more about multiplayer, all right? So we're going to improve the multiplayer character a little bit. I want to improve spawning. I want to talk about skinning characters and how we can do that in multiplayer, actually in any game. A little bit about RPCs, remote procedure calls, because we need to do that, and adding animations and montages and having an interaction system all today, before 6 p.m. Lots of stuff to do. If we can get out early, I'll try. Okay, I will try to get it early. Every time I've done this, this lecture, it's run late. It's run really long. And same thing with tomorrow's lecture. I have a lot to show you tomorrow with on the AI side. Expect a full day. Okay, it's a lot of stuff because I need to prepare you for assignment 1. All right. Oh, one more service announcement. Next week, sorry, before I forget. Because next week is Global Game Jam and it's starting at 3, our class normally is scheduled from 1 to 4 on Friday. I will move up the class time from 12 to 3 on Friday next week, okay? Just letting you know. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. I will also record everything just in case you couldn't get it, but I need to do that because we need to physically be here at 3. There's everything starting at 3 next week, so that's why we're going to move things up 1 hour to support Global Game Jam, okay? All right, and I'll publish that announcement too. Let's continue with the stuff that we're doing. I want to start by improving player spawning, and to do that, I'm going to pull up a project. I made a copy of week 2, and I've called it week 3. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove my Git repository here and just start this project off by making sure it still runs. So one thing that happens is when you ever download something from DevOps for multiplayer, because when you put things up on DevOps, it strips away certain files, you may lose some of your editor preferences. Hopefully you've seen that and you understand what that means, why it happens. It's because of that. Whenever I put things up on DevOps or GitHub, some things are removed because of my git ignore file, and as a result, I don't have some things that I normally have in my editor preferences. So if I go to editor preferences, you can see that my asset editor open location is default. I want it to go to main window, and I do that all the time because of DevOps. If I was downloading it and I was working with a project long-term on my machine, I wouldn't have to do that. At the same time, last week what we talked about, just as a recap, was number of players. Notice the number of players went down to 1 again. This is all editor stuff, so I have to put that to 2. So that's something that we have to do, and we have to change our net mode to play as listen server, which is what we want to do to test our project. Otherwise, your multiplayer project will be a single player game. Okay, it's not going to work. So if I press play, then you're going to see that I have 2 windows that have come up, right? And here's my first window. I can run with my main character. But one thing I showed you guys last week is I have janky movement, really bad, and it prevents me from running at all with my, my secondary character. I can move pretty quick, right? But I can't really sprint properly, right? It kind of prevents me. So what we did last week, if you recall, is if I bring up the multiplayer character, we created a shortcut which is the remote procedure call. I kind of did it like this, and I'm sprinting on the server, and I'm stopping sprinting on the server. I kind of did that last week really quickly at the end. I want to go over that again today, and I also want to talk about how this still quite doesn't work. It's not perfect, right? And the reason why this isn't perfect is even though I'm sprinting from the server, the client is still resisting. And I'll talk about how that is. So we'll talk about how to fix that. So this is it from last week. I'm going to save all and put this up on DevOps now, just to go through that whole cycle. Now that everything has been generated, so I'm going to just kind of open in terminal and do that whole git init and all that stuff. So git init, git add dot, and blah, blah, blah. You should know how to do all this stuff already. And of course, what I need is a new repository here, which is what I'm going to do next. So there's new repository, and we're going to call this GAME2007 and the winter 2026 semester, and it is week 3. No README file, and click create. There we go. And I'm going to grab those files, or the steering instructions, go back to here, right click, and we'll push that to week 3, which will give you everything that we have. Now I'm separating it like this for a bunch of reasons. One, you can always look at, like, what do we do in week 2? Okay, what do we change from week 2 to week 3? You can do that. I encourage you guys to look at my code just in case, or my project. Coding is, you won't see the code here for this one, but you'll see the differences between one week and the other. All right, excellent. So now that we have that, I can close this off. And I can even close this off for now, because I'm not going to do anything with Blackboard. So I want to start doing stuff that I want to, we want to start with. And one problem that we have right now is we are spawning, but it's random where I spawn. So notice, like, if I press play a couple times, let's try this out. And let's change my scalability back to auto, because I was on medium yesterday because of that river. It was crazy. But if I go to play, I want you to notice something that, okay, so here's my main character, and I started out on the right side, right? And if I stop and I press play again, here's my main character, and I started on the left side, or the right side again. I'll see if I can do this again. Sometimes, depending if I do it a bunch of times, it's still on the left side. But it will randomly pick there it is. Now it's on the right side. Take a look at that, right? It'll randomly pick a location for me to start, as opposed to being controlled in terms of the way I want. So I want to modify this. And to do this, believe it or not, we're going to use the game mode. So into the game mode project, the blueprint, please. This is where we're going to do our work. You can see that we have a couple of these events, right? And so inside the blueprint, what I want to do is I want to override, right? And remember, we talked about overriding last time. What does override do compared to overload? There's two terms here. They're both related to OOP, object-oriented programming. What's override compared to overload? Anybody? Yes?
One replaces the function, one adds on the function.
Almost, yeah. What about, yeah?
Does overload add more parameters or override, like, rewrites the function?
Override, you guys got override rewrites, you said that. But overload does something else. Overload presents other function signatures. That's what I want you to think about. Almost like another way to utilize the same function name. So instead of it being, let's say, for example, I have a function called, greetings, whatever. I could have a function called greetings that takes no parameters. I can have a function called greetings that takes 2 parameters, or 1 parameter, as an example. And what it does is it gives the user an opportunity to, to be able to use different parameters for different reasons, right? So that's why we want to do that. For example, if I had my own vector function, let's say I made my own vector 2, right? My vector 2 could take another vector 2 as a parameter, right? So I pass a vector 2 to the function. That's an option. I could pass x and y coordinates, right? That's another option. Or I could pass an array, right, of floats. That's also an option. So those are 3 different kinds of parameters with the same function name, vector 2, right? So why do I want to do that? I want to give flexibility to the user of my function so that they can do different things. That's what it's for. All right, so override is not that. Override is overwriting. Like, basically, I'm overwriting everything that's inside that function. Same name that I want to use, but the function body changes. So if I want to do the override, I want to click override here, and there is this function called choose player start, right? That's what I want to override, so you can see that. Now, one thing to note is that the functions that are able to be overridden are different depending on the file that you're using. So if I have a blueprint that's game mode inherits from game mode base, as you can see in the top. And so game mode base has all those functions, right? And so we're overriding what comes from game mode base, right? But if I open this up and if I tried to find the find player start or choose player start inside of my player character, you can also override those. You can see that, you know, choose player start doesn't exist because that function doesn't exist in character. Character is the superclass for this class, right? So here we're going to choose player start, and when I do that, it kind of creates a little blueprint, and there's two parts to it. There's the input, that's the parameter. Let's think about this in C++. This would be the function signature with a player parameter, a player of type controller object reference. Even though it says player, it's not actually a player. It's controller object reference. It's a controller that you're getting, right? And the return type is also an actor object reference. So I'm actually returning out an actor if I want to, right? So that's the way this works. So now what I want to do with this is I want to change, right, you know, kind of the way the actors are spawned. So when I choose a player start, I want to look at, I want to get all actors of class player start. Now remember what that means. If I go back to my level, you can see that in my level hierarchy here on the right-hand side, my outliner, you can see that I have two player starts, player start and player start 2. That's what we're looking for. Player start is actually an asset that is built upon a class. That's the player start, right, itself. Here's what it is. And I'm looking for all actors of player start. That's what I'm doing. So that's what the first thing I'm going to do is get all actors. If I type that in, get all actors of class. And what that's like, I always liken this to Unity, where you like kind of find, you know, as an example. And I want to find it of type player start. Right, here it is. That's the player start that I'm looking for. And what this is going to do is going to give me an array of all of those actors. So I'm getting, and remember the keywords here is get all actors, multiple of class, right? I'm not getting one actor, I'm getting multiple, and that's what I'm doing here. And then what I want to do is I want to do a for each loop. So then if I do this, here's my for each loop. And the for each loop is going to loop through each element of my actors of class array, in this case 2, right? And what I want to do with that element is the player start element. So I want to promote this to a local variable. So again, to do this, you can actually click on the output pin, right click, and promote to local variable. There's two promotions, by the way, one to variable and one to local variable. Remember how this works? Variable is the variable for the blueprint. Local variable is the variable for the function, only for the function, which is good. So I'm going to make local variable, and we're going to rename this variable player start element. Okay, so that's what we're going to call it. You can always rename it up here too. So player start element. There we go. And of course, what we want to do is, because we're assigning this value, it's a quick kind of way of doing it. Notice also at the top right corner here, guys, look at that. There's this little v, right? This little v tells you it's a function variable. That's important to note. So whenever you see this little v symbol in Unreal Engine 5.5 and going forward, this means it's a local variable. That's important. So if you see my stuff in PowerPoint and you see this little v, then you know that you need to create a local variable that matches this. Okay, now that we have a local variable, we want to get the player start tag. So if I go there and I say player start tag, right? And if I get the player start tag, that's what I want. So how do I know to get this? Because all player starts, if I go, let's go back to this for a second. Let's look at player start here. It's not an object I'm creating. Look, it has a player start tag. It's right here, right? And so it's a convenient way of us storing information inside the player start about anything you want. Who's the player, any other information you want, the location, like there's a lot of stuff you can store inside of your player start tag. But for us, what we're going to do is we're going to get the player start tag and we're going to compare it to make sure that it's not used, right? So if I say that's not equal to, and if you just type in not equal like this, so exclamation equal sign, and then used is the text that I'm going to use. By the way, the input for this is of type text, not of type string. You can see that if I hover over, or sorry, type name. Then that is a condition, right? So this becomes a condition that I can branch with And again, when you think about what branching is, it's just an if statement. Here we go. So I can say something like, okay, so if this is true, then do something. If it's false, do nothing. Just ignore it, as an example. So then I want to take the player start element and say that if it's not used, right, then I want to make it used. That's what I'm doing. So I'm saying the player start element. So I can just do this. And then I can say set player start tag, right? And I can set the player start tag now to the other condition, which is used, right? So I can say now it's used. So this prevents me from spawning in the same place, right? That's what it does. Prevents me from spawning in the same place. If it's used, it won't go there. It'll spawn somewhere else. That's important to do. Okay, so that's what this is really doing, this whole function, which is choosing the player start. The next thing I want to do is I want to the player start element, I want to return that out. So I want to take that player start element, and that's the pawn that I'm returning out, right? Sorry, that's the player start object reference. And what it's looking for, of course, is an actor object reference, any actor. I'm just returning that stuff out. And there you go. That's the function. So I've overridden the way that this function normally operates. The normal way this operates, it doesn't do any of this stuff that I'm doing. It doesn't check, right? And it doesn't stop me from spawning there, but it won't allow me to spawn in the same location, which is still possible, by the way. All right? It's more rare, but if I have multiple players spawning, they'll spawn in the same location. Okay? So that's bad. So that's what this does, and that's the first thing that I want to do. Okay? So that is the first thing I want to do. That's going to stop me from spawning in the same spot. Okay? There's other things I can do here. Challenge for you guys. If I always wanted player 0 to start in the first spawn point and player 1 to start in the second spawn point, how would you do it? So think about that. By the way, getting player ID sometimes is challenging. Like we did that for the server. The server gives us a really weird player ID compared to the player, right? So there's some complications involved with this, believe it or not. Let's try this out. And all this will do is make sure, it's not going to do anything different than what we've done so far, but it's going to make sure that when I press play, that I'm not going to spawn on top of anybody else. Because that can happen. That can be like, we can be in the same spot all the time, right? And that's not a thing that I want to do. But notice that so far, a side effect so far has been that I'm always spawning on the left. I'm always spawning on the left. Right? I'm always spawning on the left. Why is that? Why do you think that is? I've overridden the player start thing. And so because I've overridden, the player start had some randomization to where you start, and now that's been removed. So all that stuff that we have to worry about is gone. Let's put this up on DevOps. So file save all. And we can go on DevOps and put that up. And we'll say added or overrode player start. There we go. All right, so that is the first thing I want to do. Next, I want to talk about some other funky things we can do with skinning. So our characters look the exact same. We have a lot of materials to choose from if you want to. How do we do this? So again, I can go to MP BP_MP character, and I want to add a new material, a new variable called skin material of type material interface object reference. It's important. So again, I don't have to use game mode anymore. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to, again, skin material is what I want to call it. And I'm going to click a new variable. And it's going to be a material interface. Material interface, kind of object reference. It's not what it says. Material interface object reference. Yeah, let me try that again. Material interface object reference. There we go. So why this? Well, what it does, it allows us to change the material that we want. That's a skin material. Compile and save that. And you can see by default, there is no object reference that we have. So that's the first thing we want to do. And one thing that I want to do, because I want this material to be replicated I want this material to be replicated across the network, I want to use something called rep notify. And let me talk about rep notify in a second, so that you understand what's happening here. So remember what I said to you guys before. The things that we see in single player work differently in multiplayer, right? I'm replicating my whole character when I spawn, right? So what I want to do is I want to use rep notify because when I change the material interface, then I want another function that's going to be called. This is neat. It's almost like I'm listening for my material interface variable to change, and then I call this other function, okay, which is kind of cool. So let's do this. So again, I'm going to go to my skin material, and on the right, you can see under replication, there is a rep notify option. When I choose the rep notify option, guess what happens? I get a new function that automatically gets generated called onRep skin material. It's a custom function that gets created. You do not want to change the name of this one, okay? So this function, which is an empty function right now, you can do a lot with it, like any other function. And what it'll do is be called as soon as I change the material. If I change the material or select the material for skin material, this will be called instantly in multiplayer. All right, so that's number one. Second thing is I definitely want to make it instance editable. I want to do that. And you don't need to make it expose on spawn. I'm pretty cool like that. Next, I want to talk about this rep notify stuff. And I guess it's kind of hard to read the slide a little bit, but it's really when I attach rep notify to a variable, right? That's what I do. And I'm listening for that variable to change, like I said. And as soon as I do that, whether it's in Blueprints or C++, then to handle replication properly, it's going to listen for that variable to change and call a related function. That's what it's going to do. And that function is what we're going to use to do certain things. Here's where we use rep notify. When I want to use UI elements, if I say to you guys, I want to make a UI element that's going to be changed for both characters, I want to use rep notify. Okay, that's the method that we need to use, okay? If I want to trigger an animation, rep notify, all right? Because if I don't do that, then the animation will play on the server, but it won't play anywhere else, which is weird, right? That's the way it works. You have to tell specifically, the system what is, happening, what's not. On the server, this is where rep notify changes, all right? So when a value of rep notify changes, it happens on the server. The server is the one that's been notified, and that's what happens. So the notify function is only called on clients, not on the server. So this is how it happens, right? So the notification, let me go back and say that again. The notification system, the observer pattern, which is what we're using right now, the observer pattern is observing our special variable that we're watching for any changes. That's happening on the server. But the actual notification itself, whatever happens in that function, happens on the client, right? Which is basically the server saying, hey, client, something happened over here, do something. Because the server's got authority, yeah.
So all it's really doing is using the client to check a variable to make sure it's reflected on both.
Absolutely, because if it doesn't, then it happens on the server but not on the client, right? So that's important. There's some great documentation I highly encourage you to read, my friends, which is all around actor replication of properties. You will need this. You may need to refer to this when it comes to the stuff you're doing for assignment 1, okay? Because it's a lot of good detail here. It talks about different things like priority and relevancy and a bunch of other stuff that we will get to, but it's important for you guys to know some of this stuff. So, for example, if you want to know more about remote procedure calls, they really talk about that right here, okay? There's 3 types of remote procedure calls that it shows you, which is on the server, on the remote, or a multicast. Thank you. And one thing to note is I am not doing things in C++. I'm only doing things with Blueprints right now. In multiplayer 2, which is what we're going to do in the fall of 2026, when you guys go to 3rd year, whoever's going to go to 3rd year, we're using more C++, right? Because we're going to need to do more fine-grained control than we're doing right now. All right, so next. So on rep skin material, so what I want to do is I want to get a reference to the mesh. Let's do that. So go back to the mesh itself. So that's what I'm doing here. So here's the mesh. I'm pulling that in to this little function. And then what I want to do is I want to get my skin material, get that in there. Here's my skin material. And as soon as I do that, notice that because I have an on rep notify on my skin material, I got these two spheres. I don't want to say balls. There's two spheres that are on here. All right. And whenever you see these two spheres, right, my friends, I want you to think about it has something to do with the network. All right. That is a symbol. When you see it, you're like, that is something to do with the network. Okay. So now, because skin material has a rep notify associated with it, you get those two spheres that you see there. That's the symbol that you get. All right. And if you actually hover over those two things, you know, and hope to get something out of it, you won't. But you know, it does tell you what this is, right? So the next thing we want to do is we want to set the material. So I want to say that here I want to set material, and then I'm going to set the material to this material interface object reference, and that's what we're doing. So we're actually doing the changing of the material on the client. Now this is also going to work for the listen server, because the listen server is both, takes two roles. It has the server and the client together. That's the architecture that we're going with the listen server. So that's important to note. Compile and save. So that's the first thing. We've made this on rep notify function, the on rep skin material, and all it's going to do is assign the skin material to the material. Okay? Next, what we're going to do is we need to change the material for each character once it has been added to the level. So how do we do that? Well, so this is where we're going to go back to MP game mode, right? I want to do it there. And you might be like, why there and not on other places? It makes sense to go on the game mode because the game mode itself is something that both players have, right? And it spawns, you know, as an example, before the players are in play, right? So that's why it will exist. So I want to make an array variable, right, of type material interface object reference, and it's going to be called skin material. So I want to do that on the game mode. So back to the game mode, I want to make a new variable, and it's going to be of material interface object reference, but we're going to make it so that it is a array. So again, to do the array thing on the right hand side here, we're going to choose array. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it so that, and I'm also going to expose it on make it instance editable. And skin materials, because it's an array, if I compile and save, on the right hand side, you can add, manually add array elements. Take a look right here, right? Where I can add as many array elements as I want. Let's add in 4 array elements. That's what I want to do before I go on. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my 4 array elements. And here what I can do is this is the skin material that we're going to choose from. So for the first one, maybe we'll make it red. So if I type in mi_red, that'll be the first material. Okay? And the next one will be this blue material. Let's try the next one. So I'll say mi_blue, and you can see the blue material also exists. And after that, we'll make a purple material. There we go. So we'll say mi_purple. Right? There we go. And there's lots of different things that are included with this project, so you can choose all of them. You know, and then I want to choose mi_green. So there's all the players. So if I had 4 players, then I can choose in order, red first, then blue, then purple, then green, and everyone would have some differences in their appearance. That's what I want. Okay, so that's the skin materials. I want to compile and save. And what I also want to do is this skin count. Right, so skin count is an integer. Let's do that. So I'm going to add that in as a variable. There we go, skin count. And that is just going to be an integer, but it's only going to be a single, not an array. There we go. And I'll also expose that. Why not? And compile and save. So that's what I've done. I've kind of put these skin materials. I've kind of listed materials here. This is kind of a cheating way to do it, but it's kind of neat, where I can put only the materials that I want on the server. Right? And remember that the game mode, because it exists in the server, you know, is something that is available to all clients. All right, great. So the next thing I want to do is in the event graph, I want to use a new event called event on restart player. Okay, so that's the one I want to do, and that's in the event graph. So let's get rid of the event begin play just to clear that up. So event restart player. If I type in event restart on restart player, that is a special event that is included in the game mode and not on the character. Okay? So this is why we're doing it on game mode as well. Game mode has specific things when it comes to when the player starts, right? And it allows us to, to respond when the restart player is activated, when a new player restarts or starts. Then what do I want to do? I want to get the controlled pawn, get controlled pawn. So this is something interesting because the new player, right, if I hover over what that is, it's actually a controller object reference. I'm getting its controller, so whatever that player's controller is. And whatever pawn is being controlled by the controller, remember that the controller is actually separate from the pawn, right? If you don't choose a separate controller, then game mode will generate it for you, right? But if we choose a separate controller, we can make our own controller function, right? Or blueprint, and that's what this is doing. So this is the controller for the pawn, or the pawn, and then we want to cast this to MP character. So I want to try that. So I want to say, cast to BP underscore MP character. So we're getting the character reference. That's what we're doing here. Okay. And then once we've got the character reference, what I want to do is I want to take this character reference. We know that the material has changed. I want to set the material. Let's try this. So if I set the material, right? So if I skin, if I set the skin material right here, notice that all I do is just a regular setter. But as soon as I press enter, I have a special little thing here. Uh-oh, look. It's not just set the material, it's set with notify, and I have these two spheres which indicate that this function, this setter is actually setting something, and when it's setting something, it's telling you that the onRep notify function is also going to be called. That's what's happening here. Okay? So what we want to do is I want to get the skin materials array. So here's my skin materials array. Here it is. And the array has up to now 4 materials. I want to use the skin count to get the element. So we'll say get. And I want to use the skin count, which basically says, remember skin count starts at 0. I want to get the first skin, and then I want to assign it to the skin material of the player that is affected, whatever that player is, right? Now, if I don't do anything, it's going to give the same material twice, right? We don't want this. We want to increment the material after it's been assigned, so that I'm going to use skin count plus plus. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to say, hey, skin count, copy paste, and I want to do plus plus. If you just do plus plus there, it increments the integer. And what this is like is just like in C++, where we do C, whatever the variable name is plus plus. Now, here's a problem. I have to mention this. What if I have 5 players, 6 players, 7 players? What's going to happen? Bad things happen to good people when they program like this, my friends. All right? Where we don't accommodate for if the material, the number, is greater than the count, the material count. So what do I do to safeguard this? I don't have this in PowerPoint. How can I fix this function and make it more future friendly? Right? Like example, if I want 5 players, 6 players, 10 players, 18 players, whatever it's going to be. What do I do? Yes. Logan, you had your hand up? Tell me.
Could you make it reset skin count if it goes over?
Yeah.
Just as a safety net.
So how do I do that? Give me the code.
Just perform that after it increments.
Well, that's very, very, very wise of you to say it that way, but I want you to give me the blueprints. I want you to give me the nodes.
Oh yeah, okay. Then I'd say branch and condition.
Okay, so branch, right? And then condition is going to be, what's the condition?
Greater than.
So skin count.
Yep, 5.
Oh, greater than 5, really?
Sorry, 2.
2? No, we don't want that because that's a fixed number. What if I have 18 players? What if I have 20 players? What if I have whatever? I don't want them all the same skin, right? So what I could do is I could check to see if it's greater than the skin materials, right? That's what I want to do. So I get the skin materials, but you're on the right track. Skin materials dot, and then length, if you notice there's a length. And so if it's greater than the skin material's length, which means there's more, I've gone over, right? Then what do I want to do? I want to set the skin count, right? That's what I want. That's my condition. And as, by the way, is this right? So it starts at 0, and it goes 1, 2, 3. And if I go to 4, skin count is 4, right? You know, the length is 4. It's not greater. That means it'll assign 4. 4 doesn't exist because it's only 0, 1, 2, 3. So is this right? Greater than or equal to is what I need to do. So I can do that. I can change this to greater than or equal to. That's the right thing to do. And then once it's greater than or equal to, then that satisfies the condition. And once it satisfies the condition, then what I can do is I can take my skin count, so I can set it now to 0. And that is the fix. That will rotate. That means after I go to 4, if I added the 5th player in this case, it will be red. Right? And every 4 players, it'll be red again. Right? But it won't be red until, so I won't run out of materials. My problem is, this is my worry. The materials will run out and some bad thing is going to happen where it's going to crash my machine. Right? I don't want that to happen. I don't want to crash the game because I'm missing something. I'm trying to assign a null object reference. It doesn't exist. And then, or I get some weird cockamamie thing happening where the material's black. You know, I don't want that to happen. Right? So that's what this does. It doesn't stop me from, you know, assigning the same materials twice. What I could do instead of this, not only could I do skin count is equal to 0, instead of doing it this way, here's another thing I could do. I could dynamically create new skins. Here's another one to do, right? So I'll never run out of skins, right? And how do I do that? I can make unlimited number of skins, right? Because if you think about it, I can just tint the skin a little bit so it's slightly different. Maybe I can change some of the colors, random skins that appear. Every skin will be slightly different, and I can make unlimited numbers of them. I can add it onto my array. If it doesn't exist, add another one, add another one, add another one, and keep adding them forever, right? By the way, it's like the same thing I would do if I was doing a bullet pool. Imagine if I have a bullet pool and I only have 50 bullets, right? And then when I'm firing the gun, I realize that I've run out of bullets. I don't have any more bullets in the pool, right? What do? Add more bullets. So what you do is you add more bullets to the pool, and you do a little bit of testing as a game developer, and you're like, wait, I just added, on top of my 50 bullets, add another 150. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to reset everything to 200 bullets now because I've already tested that 200 bullets is about right. I don't have to add more than that, you know, as an example. And this is stuff you can do in your post processing. All right, so this is good. Compile and save. I've done this part, and this will help us. And let's test it out. Let's see if it works. So compile and save and test. So now we should see that first player gets red and second player gets blue. Well, let's add a few more players. Let's do that. So let's test it with 4 players. So we'll say 4 players. Right? There we go. And then once I have 4 players, notice it's full with 4 players because a listen server can only afford 4 players at once. If I was going to have a dedicated server, which we're going to play with in game multiplayer, you know, game design 2, we're going to have unlimited players, right? Then you wouldn't do it here. You wouldn't make a listen server. You'd make, instead of a listen server, you'd make a dedicated server, and we'll do that at that time. Let's press play and see what happens. I'm going to add 4 players. Here they are, and my expectation is that each player is going to have their own thing, and we have a bit of an issue. So here's the problem, right? I'm going to just, first of all, my memory is really low again. But here's a problem, and I want to talk about this. What happened to the other 2 players?
Since we didn't establish a spawn for either of them, they kind of spawn outside the area.
Well, that's a problem. So
that's
no good. Yeah, that's no good. So here's something that we can do. Also, my memory completely ran out, right? So I mean, I mentioned this because, you know, you can break the game pretty good, right? If you really want to. So here's my player 1 start. I'm going to go back up here. And there's player 2 start. So there's a couple players. Let's move these guys up a little bit. I'm just, you know, I don't want to make them too crazy, but let's move these both up. So this one and this one. I'm going to move them up here. There we go. And then I'm just going to replicate them. Just press Alt, drag, and now we have 4. So it's 2 in the back and 2 in the front. Okay? And if I do that now, if I press play, now they're all going to start in different positions. I still might have the memory problem, but they're all in a different spot. So this one here in this window, they're in the back. You can see I'm just having memory issues. And it also says client 123, which is important to note. Like it spawned client 1, an autonomous proxy. It spawned client 2 and client 3. And it also had the server and the role is authority. So I'm not sure if you guys can have any more than me, but I can tell you that I'm over by 500 megabytes in terms of my video memory budget. How do I fix that video memory budget? Can I do it effectively? By the way, there are hacks to do this, so I can increase my memory budget. And my other question to you is, do I want to? Right? Here's the thing. It all comes down to my settings. So if I reduce my settings again, so if I go back to my settings, and if I go to engine scalability and I go to medium, right, change the lighting a little bit for multiplayer, but if I press play now, maybe I'm not going to get that message, right? And that means that I'm going to be able to play each individual character, and you can see that depending on how I go, then you're going to see that each of them has a different skin. And you can see that here clearly. Okay? So that's definitely one way of doing it. My friends, this is why when I'm, my machine I have at home, and if you're going to buy a new machine for fall of 2026, if you're going to go to third year, if you're in that state where you need to buy a new machine, like a laptop that you're going to bring with you, highly recommend at least 16 gigabytes of video memory that you have at all times for testing with Unreal Engine. Okay? Which means, what does that mean, guys? What does 16 gigabytes mean for a laptop? What kind of card you need? If it's an RTX card. A 5080, my friends. That's what you need. All right? If you don't have a 5080, you're going to run into this issue because the 5070 only has 12 gigabytes, right? And you might think, oh, 12 gigabytes is pretty good. Nope. Right? So just letting you know. Like, for example, our 3070 here has 8. Right? And that's not good. You need at least 12 to 16. If you can get a 5080, great. If you can get a 5090, I think you're rich, right? I don't know how you're going to afford that. That's way too expensive. I don't recommend it. Okay? But 5080 is the limit. There's some great deals on Amazon right now. I don't work for these people, I swear to God. But you can get one for about $4,000. All right? So, but that's the most. And I love, listen, I love Alienware. But you can save your money if you don't buy Alienware. And if you buy something like an MSI, you're still going to be okay with a pretty good system and $2,000 saving. All right? All right. So back to this. So I had the scalability change a little bit because if I didn't, then I wouldn't be able to play all these characters. All right, but what if I don't need all those characters? What happens now? Is it still going to be random? Because I just added 2 more spawn points. Let's go back to 2. And I can change my scalability settings back to auto, because I'm not going to have more than 2 for us, right? We know that the skinning works, and if I press play, I get red and blue. And if I stop, and if I press play, then I'm going to get red and blue, and they're all going to be in the same spot all the time. All right, so that's good. I've tested my skinning. Let's put this up on DevOps. So file, save all, and let's put this up on DevOps. Git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added material skinning. So we learned something, right? We learned that the reason why we did the skinning thing in the first place was to demonstrate 2 things. If I want to change a property and it has to replicate across the network and it's something to do with user interface or visuals, I want to use a rep notify, okay? If it doesn't have to do something with visuals, I may not need to use a rep notify, but anything user interface, animation, material changes, all those kind of things, I need to use a rep notify so the clients are aware that something has changed. If I don't, and if I call this directly, then you'll only see the change on the server and not on the client. Okay? All right, so that's the first part. Next, let's continue. I want to talk about RPCs. So what are they? Really what they are is it's a system that allows a function or event to be called on a different machine in a network game, and it's a core concept because It enables communication between clients and the server. And we've done this already. We have to use custom events. That's what we have to do. And one thing to note is that they're unreliable, and this means that there's no guarantee that the function call will reach its destination. So why is this? Performance. We talked about last week about packets. I send packets across the network, and what happens is if a packet gets across the network but there's lag or some kind of something goes wrong, right? Then what might happen for that 1 second is that packet, there's data corruption. And if there's data corruption in the stream, it means, if I do an RPC, it may or may not work, right? That particular moment in time, that frame, because of, I'm going to have to check. I have to do acknowledgements. If I check on reliable, which I can do, what that means is check to see that you've got an acknowledgement back from the thing that you're sending the message to that things are going okay. That's extra network traffic that I'm generating when I click on reliable. If you don't care for it to be reliable, like for example, if one frame, the first frame, and there's lots of busyness or whatever, and you don't care if like in the second frame it changes, or third frame or fourth frame, or whatever, there'll be a bit of lag that first time, then you leave it as unreliable, right? If you don't really care about it, right? But if you really care about it, like there's something you need for the client to see, you click it as reliable. But the more of those you do, the more load on the server. Okay, just keep that in mind. All right, so you can enforce reliability. And the way to do this is if you put it on the server itself. Okay, so we kind of did this last week before we left. I kind of said like the way to do the sprint is, if I go back to the character in the event graph, what we did was I wrapped the sprint function with my custom event. That's what we did, okay? The custom event is the thing that calls the server. If I actually click on the custom event on the right, I've actually checked it as reliable. We want it reliable because this is character movement. If character movement is not reliable, it's a bad thing, okay? That's the problem with it. So what you do is whenever you call or create a custom events are special in that you can mark them, like in C++, an event like this would actually be marked with an annotation that says run on server. Like literally it would be like that, right, on C++. And you can also mark it as reliable. Like the actual, the U function. So U function and in brackets of U function, which we never would do, you can say, like reliable and run on server. You can do that kind of stuff, okay? It's not exactly that, but it's close. So that's one thing. I still think it's a little bit janky, even with this way. Like if you notice, if I'm running on the server, then let's run the client on the server here. Let's see what happens. So I'm running, and then you can see that I get this like weird jitter happens. Look at that jitter. Can you see it? Here, I'll make it bigger so you can see it. So it's pretty small, but we're going to make it so that the client is much bigger. And I want you to see the client machine. So this is the client machine. And then look at that weird jittering. Do you see that? That's crappy, guys. That's really bad, right? Why is this happening? Because the client and the server are fighting. Even though the server is telling it now to sprint, the client's like, wait, are you telling me to sprint? Okay, I'll sprint. Oh, wait, are you telling me to sprint? Oh, yeah, okay, I'll sprint. Okay, wait, are you telling me to sprint? It's got a problem. Now, I'm going to tell you how you do this. It's a bit of a hack, but it works, okay? And I figured this out, because this is the first level. The first level is create your custom event, all right? But depend on what you're trying to use your custom event for rep notify, your RPC, remote procedure call. You may or may not need to do another layer. Here's the second layer that we would put into place, all right? So here we have the calling on the server. Let's make another custom event. So if I add this, not on the PowerPoint. If I add custom event, and I call this custom event sprint, and we'll call it client. Okay, let's try this out first. Sprint on the client. Okay, and then we'll add another custom event. Add custom event, and we'll call this sprint. Stop sprinting. Stop sprinting on the client. And I'm mentioning this, like, change the names of these things so you understand what I mean by it. So here on sprint client, instead of it being on replicates, I'm going to go on owning client, run on owning client here. Here, as well as here. So these are only going to run on the client, okay? Now what I want to do is I want to grab this stuff, cut it, put it over here, and have this run on the client, okay? Bear with me. You'll see what I'm doing in a second. So this is a second layer that you can use, right? And then the Sprint server will call the client. So Sprint on the client. And you're going to say, wait, what the heck? Stop sprinting. What the heck? Why would you do this? Well, let's follow this through the logic a little bit. So when the button is pressed, that's what's happening here. The server has authority, and it'll tell the client, hey, Mr. Client, it's time to sprint. And then the client, which is also wrapped in an RPC, says, oh, it's time to sprint, right? And so the broadcast happens on the client as well, okay? Not just on the server. One thing to note is you probably want to make this reliable as well, okay? So these two things, you can mark them as reliable. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it's any better. By the way, you're going to notice, make this a little bigger, that when I sprint, I'm not sprinting anymore. No matter what I do, I can't sprint, right? I'm not going fast at all anymore, but I also don't have a really janky movement. I just can't sprint. So that's not the solution, right? Remember I said there's different options? Here's the other option. The other option is multicast. Multicast means that if I hover over, replicates. It depends on what you're doing. So multicast itself is, it's going to broadcast to both the client and the server. Okay? So now let's change the name because this doesn't make any sense. We'll call this Sprint Multicast. And we'll change this name to Stop Sprinting Multicast. And we'll change this to Multicast. So now, both of those things are, it says executes on all. But this is coming after the server's been called. So the server has authority, then it's calling broadcast everywhere. That's what it's really saying. Server has authority, broadcast everywhere. Okay? Let's try this out and see if this is any better. Okay, so if I press play and we're on the client, let's make the client bigger so you can see it. So I want you to see the difference, right? You can't see it when it's small. Okay, now I'm sprinting and no more jankiness. Notice that? No more jankiness, my friends. You don't see that weird thing, and I am sprinting. And that's why we do it. Okay? So that's the way you do it. So it's an encapsulation process. I know it's weird what this does, but what it's actually doing is it makes sense. Hey, client, I want you to sprint. Okay, cool, but I'm not really going to the client. I'm actually doing a multicast as well. So the server is doing a multicast. Now, if you try to do a multicast the first time, let's move it around to show you this. So just to be clear so that you understand the difference, because it's going to come to you guys, you're going to work on this, and you're going to be like, I don't get it. I don't know why it doesn't work, because you didn't do all the right stuff. So let's just do this. Let's directly multicast instead of using the server. Or actually, let's undo that change. Hold on a second. The best thing to do is just over here. Okay, we'll just multicast instead of server. Okay, what if I just did this? So here, I'm going to go when started. I'm going to say, sprint multicast. I avoid the server altogether. All right, because that's supposed to work on both client and server, right? And completed. Stop sprinting. Multicast. So now I'm not doing the server at all. I'm not even going with these custom functions aren't even being accessed at all. These two things. Let's see what happens. So compile and save. And if I run, then let's see what happens. So here I am with the client, and I can't sprint at all. I just can't. See? And it's janky move it too. So that's why. All right, you have to do it in this certain order. I'm telling you this because you're going to run into this issue with multiplayer, where you're like, I don't know why, but it's supposed to do it because I'm telling it to do it. Yep, but you need to do this. Encapsulate it twice because it makes sense. All right, let's undo those changes. So I'm going to put them back the way they were, and then now we'll compile and save, and we'll put it up on DevOps. So k.dot git commit -m, and we'll say fixed janky sprinting. Okay, git push. Does it make sense? What I'm trying to say? It looks weird, but try it. Here's what I encourage you to do. If something is not working and you're like, wait, Tom said that if I use an RPC, a remote procedure call, and I'm using, in order for me to do a remote procedure call, I create a custom function and it's not doing what I want it to do, maybe I need to do this. That's what I'm telling you to do. Remember that Spider-Man pointing meme? That's this, okay? All right, so, and this is good. I'm happy we were able to do that. I did check it as reliable. We talked about this. One thing that I could do to take this further is to create little functions for each of the functions themselves. I'm not going to do that here. Let's take a short break. We're sitting at about 4:07. Let's take about 10 minutes. When we come back, we'll do interactions.